So to introduce ourselves and who we are and why are we here, my name is Roxana. I am one of the members of the Union City Community Garden. We have officially began to construct the garden this year in April, and we're excited to get ready for planting in the next couple of days. So this is why we have invited Natasha to join us in planning our crop plan before we get started. But to share a little bit more about the Union City Community Garden, it is a completely volunteer-led intergenerational space. We were provided the space by the city of Union City at the Palisade Plaza, which is right next to a senior citizens building, which gives us the beautiful opportunity to collaborate very closely with our elders from the neighborhood. The population in Union City is predominantly Spanish speaking, predominantly from different Latin American countries. So we're really taking that opportunity to take in the knowledge from folks who have been growing in their lands before they came to this country, and also providing that space where the elders could grow along with the youth. We are preparing some youth programs coming up, and lots of fun things coming up in the community. So welcome to our first ever community workshop. We hope this will be the first of many. And with that, I'll pass it along to Ceci. Thank you all.
So I'm going to introduce Natasha, our esteemed guest speaker, who is a very talented individual. She is a recipient of the Rutgers University Are You Ready to Farm program through the School of Continuing Education. She is also a consultant for the Meaty Fish, a firm that assists new and transitions small to medium scale farmers. We're excited to have her with us today. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. Next slide, so we can get started. All right. So yes, good evening, everyone. And by the way, I love the fact that you guys are doing intergenerational programming with the seniors and members of the community. I actually didn't catch on to that, but that's actually super cool, and kudos to you guys. So yes, good evening, everyone. A very good evening. It's 9 p.m., but genuinely very grateful for everyone who joined us today on this very exciting and crucial aspect of gardening, the planning and designing phase. I have the absolute honor in facilitating today's event, so thank you again for having me. So tonight's discussion is really about integrating any additional insight from those who are participating tonight into our drafted crop plan. So please don't be shy. We want to ensure that Union City Community Garden can offer the best experience possible. And that starts with you guys sharing your experience, your knowledge, and just your overall love for the community and this garden. So what is crop planning? Only one of the most important parts of garden continuity. It's very essential, and it's essentially just creating a design layout and a schedule based on certain aspects or certain specs, such as infrastructure, community needs, environmental conditions, such as like sunlight and wind, and garden philosophies. So next slide. Great. So some notes on how the beds were designed. It was done intentionally in a lasagna style, we call it. So that lasagna style approach, and it utilizes lots of like yummy nutrients from compost and other amendments such as wood and mushroom substrate. And then the cardboard serves as like a mulch, and the hay as well. And what that does is it reduces moisture loss. It helps smother the weeds. It keeps the soil nice and cool. And it's also just super beneficial once it eventually breaks down. Next slide. All right, the community needs. Very important here. So Rutgers 4-H, in collaboration with the garden directors who are hosting me tonight, thank you so much. They conducted various in-person brainstorming sessions to list out the preferred crops and the varieties in efforts to meet the needs of the community. So these sessions serve more so as like listening sessions, and all thoughts were put on paper, and then later myself and my team, we were able to assess everything and come up with this drafted crop plan that we're going to review all together. All right, the environmental conditions. So Rutgers 4-H and the site directors reviewed some of the environmental conditions throughout several weeks from putting the beds together. So these conditions are important to consider when determining which crop goes where based on the crop's needs. So for example, some crops like shady, cool areas versus crops who require absolute full sun for long periods of time. So for this site in particular, the sun is south facing. So beds 1 and 2, and we'll review in a second, but if you can see underneath garden layout, it's like a mini version of what we'll look at in a second. But beds 1 and 2, starting from the left, are covered by 2 tall trees, and the sun peeks in from behind them about 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. So they'll receive probably the most shade throughout the day. And then beds 3 and 4, which are in the middle, receive full sun experience from 12 to 6 p.m. And then beds 5 and 6 and A, which is the asymmetrical bed in the front, they'll receive partial sun remainder of the day, but they'll still get good amounts of sun. And like I said, I'll review this again when we have a further detailed look at the site. Next slide. All right, our garden philosophy. How your community wants to approach garden practices is super important. Some philosophies that Union City Community Garden considered were, the permaculture practices, companion planting, what Roxana mentioned earlier about heritage and culture and folklore background, including native pollinators, and then just community care in general. And we'll touch on a few of these as we move into our exercise. But to start, companion planting is essentially the notion that certain crops or plants perform better with the help of other crops or herbs, etc. So that can mean a variety of things, that they can grow better, they can taste better, or they'll yield in abundance. Keep in mind, however, that a lot of the reasoning behind companion planting has a lot to do with like generations of experience and folklore. It's not a proven hard science, but it is innocuous. So there's no major harm in planting them together. If it's part of your community's belief system and philosophy, then that's an approach that that this community will take. Next slide. All right, I think we're ready for our exercise. If there's questions, just put them into the chat. I know there's a Q&A portion a little later on, but just so you don't forget your questions, I encourage you guys to keep, making sure to put them in the chat room. All righty. All right, let's talk about bed number 1. So Sasi is going to be adding some crops interactive style. So this is cool. All right, let's talk about bed number 1. We want to focus on our cooler crops. Remember, I mentioned earlier that the sun is popping in from behind those 2 trees, if you see in the top left. So bed 1 and 2 are going to get a lot more shade throughout the day. So we want to choose our crops like our lettuce and our spinach. So we're going to put those down the middle, and we're going to alternate it just because of the space that's available to us. So we'll put lettuce and spinach right down in the middle in bed number 1. And then with our chives, we want to harvest these chives. So we're going to keep those over on with cilantro, and they're going to bookend that lettuce and spinach. So we're going to do chive, cilantro, chive, cilantro, chive, cilantro. And cilantro is interesting because they can actually deter a lot of the pests, such as like the slugs. So the slugs like to eat and munch on that lettuce. So we're gonna hope that the cilantro and the chives does what it does best and deter those pests. So this is where the companion planting comes into play. And then we're going to move on to our nasturtium, which is a non-edible flower in this scenario. It's used for pollination, and that's going to also bookend the chive, cilantro, and bookend that bed. Yeah, exactly. And again, just going back to that companion planting, the nasturtium can also attract like hoverflies, which feed on those aphids. And it also just provides a lot of ground cover. You don't want to leave your soil exposed. It can lead to erosion. So you do want to cover as much as possible without overcrowding your crops as well. We want to respect and honor any spacing requirements that's recommended for that crop. Okay, we can move on to bed number 2. Okay, so we're still in the shady area, so we're going to work with some other cool crops as well. So in this case, we're going to work with our kale and our basil. So for bed number 2, the basil that we're utilizing here is going to be for harvest. We are not going to let it flower because we want to harvest it and be able to eat it. If basil consumes too much sun, it'll start to lose its flavor and it'll start to bolt, which is fine if you're using it as a pollinator companion. But in this case, we are trying to harvest it. So we want to make sure that we're pinching off the tops and we're going to keep it from bolting. All right, and that kale is right down that middle and it alternates with the basil. So we're doing kale, basil, right down the middle there. And then the bookend of the kale and the basil, we're gonna move into our rosemary and our marigold. All right, so the rosemary in this case will ward off some pest. It can also be harvested, but if you're looking to use it as a assist with pollination, you do want to let it flower. But if not, you can also rely on the marigold, which is the non-edible flower in this case. It's an annual flower and it's used for pollination, which kale requires. It is a plant that requires cross-pollination, so you definitely want to have a pollinator in there when we're doing companion planting for bed number 2. And it also attracts predators such as the praying mantis. So we got a lot of ecosystem and healthy balance going on in bed number 1 and number 2. Again, if you have questions, put them into the chat. Happy to explore different experiences. All right. Awesome. All right, let's move on to bed number 3. Okay, now we're entering into our full sun experience, full dream tan experience, bed number 3 and bed number 4. I did want to make mention for bed number 3 that we're going to be utilizing this bed specifically as a turnover bed. And I'll get into the specificities of that in just a moment, but essentially we're going to plant certain things that by the end of the frost we'll be able to pull the bed apart and actually plant things that are ready and able to harvest for fall, winter. So you want to keep that in mind when you're crop planting, so that you're not hoping to plant something for the winter in something that you can't pull apart in time. So in this scenario for bed number 3, we did take that into consideration. All right, so we have our solanaceous family, our nightshades, our self-pollinating plants going into bed number 3. So we got our tomatoes and our bell peppers, which require a trellis. So we got our tomatoes on the left-hand side, alternating with that basil. The basil in this scenario for bed 3, we are going to let it flower. It's going to receive a lot of sun, so we're just going to use them as pollination here. And tomatoes and bell peppers, when they are planted together, are said to help keep away nematodes, which are just roundworms, which can be detrimental to your tomato and bell peppers. So apparently planting them together can assist with that. And then we have our eggplant on the right-hand side. We're going to plant one of those. They also need about 6 to 8 hours of sun. And eggplants also provide a lot of weed growth, help prevent a lot of weed growth as well. So when you're planting them with tomatoes and peppers, it's a good trio to put together. All right, and then we got our rosemary, which is said to improve the flavor of the bell peppers. Again, here we're going to let them flower. And then our herb we're going to use to help deter some pests is the oregano that goes into bed 3. And the oreganos are going to go more in the perimeter type of areas. So that's going to help keep pests away from the bell peppers, the eggplant, the tomatoes. And oreganos also require full sun. So it's an appropriate bed to put them in. All right. We got our first 3 beds. We can move on if people have some time. It's up to you, Sus. I can't hear you, honey.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, great. If you guys want to see or hear about any more beds, we can go through the process, or we can look at the rest of the garden as a whole and just hear some general tips and tricks. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, the turnover.
Oh, just kidding, the turnover. All right, so for bed number 3, we did talk about how that bed is special in a sense that we are planning to turn it over for October. So once we're able to pull all the last of like the tomatoes, the peppers and the eggplants, we're going to use that as our compost, of course, and then we'll smother that with a little bit of hay, and then we'll be able to plant some of our fall crops. So in this scenario, we'll do garlic, we'll do carrots. September carrots are the best carrots; they're the sweetest. And we'll do radishes. Radishes grow very, very quickly. In the summer, they do get quite spicy. So if you're into that, by all means, plant your radishes in the summertime. But if you're looking for a more balanced taste palette for the radishes, I would go with an early season, like a fall season for those. So we'll use that bed as our turnover bed for those crops specifically.
Great, thank you so much. So let's look at the entire image of what we're planning, and Natasha can speak a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Ta-da! Voila! All right, so that front bed, that asymmetrical raised bed, has lots of yummy herbs. We can do an intermix of letting them flower. Some of them we can pinch back. It really is up to the need of the community, but that is going to attract lots of native predators and butterflies and our teammates, our bees. So that's definitely going to be essential in this site. For beds 4 and 5, I think we focus mostly on our beets, our beans as well, which fix nitrogen. We have our cherry tomatoes, which also go on a trestle, and then our parsley, which we can harvest in this bed as well. And then bed 5, we've got our multicolored Swiss chard, which are delicious. We've got cucumber and zucchini, and then in between the cucumber and zucchini, we have some dill, which can be harvested as well. And then bed 6, we've got pole beans, which need to be direct seeded. We've got our lavender plants as well, and then our summer squash. I did want to go back really quick to bed number 5. Just kidding. Bed number 4. If you notice, the cherry tomatoes on the right are going to be on a trellis. So I suggested to put them there on the right-hand side because it will provide some sort of shade for like the parsley, the beets, and the beans that don't require like so much sun. Actually, the beans do require sun, but like the parsley and the beets don't require a lot of sun. So the bushels of the beans and the trestle of the cherry tomatoes will actually create like a natural shade for the beets and the parsley. So keep that in mind when you're planting your crops, is like how high certain crops will get. So if you are doing a trellis, it will provide some sort of shade. So if it's next to something that requires absolute full sun, it's probably not a good idea. It probably won't yield as much. So keep those intricacies into consideration. I also wanted to go back to bed number 2 and talk a little bit about the scallions, because I failed to mention this, so I apologize. But the scallions, the team decided to do alternating direct and transplanted scallions. Once a scallion is ready to harvest, you pull it out of the ground and it's kind of done and over. So if you do like transplant and then direct, transplant, direct, it can actually prolong the yield of your scallion for longer into the summertime. So if you're able to do that, especially when you're planning a little bit more ahead than what we're doing now, you'll be able to extend some of the lifeline of the crops. And then we have some items in the pots. For example, ginger, they do a lot better in a different type of soil capacity, very loose soil, and it's not going to yield as much, and it also takes a little bit of space, and it's a little high maintenance. So we're going to experiment with some of those crops in a pot setting. So yeah, any questions? I'll do the best I can to answer them.
We had a question from Justin asking, is there additional benefits to letting the basil flower in bed number 3?
Some of the benefits would just be creating like an ecosystem for pollinators, because once they bolt and flower, it has a different taste. I'm not saying it's something no one in the world will eat, just that it's not the basil that you're anticipating. But great question.
I had a question. Could you detail some of the various herbs we were thinking to put in here?
Can you expand your question? Detail them as in what?
Yeah, like just name them.
Oh, sure. Like in the asymmetrical one?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, absolutely. We've got oregano in there. We've got thyme. We've got lemon balm. We've got bee balm. Fennel, which encourages the state butterfly and the praying mantis. And it provides some sort of chemical that helps prevent, I forget exactly what it is. I'll get back to you on the fennel. But yeah, we've got fennel in there. We've got more cilantro. We've got parsley. We've got lemongrass. We've got chamomile. We've got sage. And I think that's about it. I'll get back to you on the fennel, but yeah, I think that's about it in bed A, which is a lot.
Yeah, definitely. We also have this anise in here too.
Anise too.
Someone asked what's in the bottom pot to the right.
That is mint, which goes crazy when it grows. It's beautiful, and it will strangle all of our crops. So we're going to keep it nice and tamed in a pot. We can also keep it in A, but it does kind of take over. So if someone is, being vigilant about the mint in bed A, I would say we can include it. But otherwise, if we want an abundance of it, it does very well on its own. We'll keep it close to the other pollinators as well so that it can thrive. But yeah, it does take over. I've also heard mixed feedback from mint that when it's by itself, it doesn't do well. So, this is a great experimental site that we can all kind of observe together.
Natasha, I have a question for you. Which of these plants do you recommend that we start from seed, or do you recommend that we just get seedlings for most of them at this point in the season?
We are late into the season, so most of them will require you to request transplants. Scallions, we could do some direct seeds. The beans absolutely only do direct seeds. It has a very fragile root system. And what else do we have on here that's direct seeds? I said the pole beans. Yeah, the pole beans, the bush beans. What else do we got on there? Pole beans and bush beans. I think those are the only ones that we have on here now. There's maybe a winter one. Yeah, the pole beans and the bush beans. Those are the direct. But we are late. We are a little late. So we'll have to rely on transplants. And the radishes during the turnover. Radishes also get direct seed. But yeah, great question.
And do you also recommend that we prepare beds per square foot and plant per square foot, or do you think that it's best to just take each plant individually as it is?
I'm a big fan of respecting the spacing requirements. So, you know, whoever you are getting your seeds from or your transplants from, you just be really careful and look whatever the spacing guides are. And that's how I would plan them out. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you. Very helpful.
Any other questions with the planning and design aspect? I did have 3 major takeaways that I wanted to just re-emphasize. I can't stress enough, again, the spacing requirements and just being really, just honoring those measurements because they're there for a reason. It also allows for a lot of air circulation between the plants. You don't want to overcrowd your beds. So that's one. And then the other one is just your IPM, like just making sure that you yourself are managing any pests. So if you see like a worm that shouldn't be there, just maybe move it to another area. I know that there's a lot of philosophies behind letting them stay. If you feel that your garden has enough predators to handle that, then you know, that's really, again, personal preference or community preference. But just your IPM plan, like making sure that someone is kind of looking to see if there's aphids, you know, removing them, destroying them, or moving them to another area, depending on your own personal philosophy again. And then lastly, it's just watering your plants early in the morning, especially this site that does get a lot of sun in beds 3 and 4. Just to prevent like diseases or letting anything kind of sit with moisture into the night. So just remembering to plant early in the morning, water early in the morning. Sometimes I feel like people come up with questions as they're doing the crop plan. So, you know, if there are questions throughout the summer, I know that Sussie's going to share the garden's email, but as questions come up, I would reach out to any of the site directors.
Thank you, Natasha. Do you want to speak about your planning process on paper, which we have a picture of? You guys can see that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I like to plan on paper first, just so that I'm able to erase and move things around and kind of think of it holistically. So what I typically do is try to visually see what it'll look like. I know, Sussy, you have it animated here, which looks absolutely beautiful. But I do like to get it down on paper first and lay out the beds and see that everything makes sense. And there, following that, obviously comes the cost and the amounts of transplants or direct seeds and pounds that we'll need. So a lot of the math comes after the design is taken place. And if we have to go back and reevaluate, depending on any type of constraints, financial constraints, time, volunteer, et cetera, then we can go ahead and reassess and change things up.
And that's the logo for your company right there too. So that's really cool.
Right. That's the meaty fish.
Would you like me to move to the next slide? Does anyone have any questions about this planning process? Just so everyone's aware, on the right is Natasha's drawing, on the left is the like more just like fun visual understanding of it, but on the right is a very like clear map on how we'll be planting.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here and speak a little bit about the garden goals. As we first introduced the garden, we mentioned how it's a completely volunteer-led and how, and just to name that these goals have really come from a lot of community surveying, especially with the senior citizens, a lot of the members and volunteers who have been showing up for the build. It's been amazing. We've had, I don't know the exact number, Ceci has a number, but I want to say at least like 30 different people come in and everybody fills out a form, a brief survey. So some of our garden goals moving forward is, let's start with restoring our native ecosystem. In order to fulfill this goal, we have applied to 2 different grants. The Hudson Gives grant, which was the big fundraiser across all of Hudson County that we participated in. And we were able to fundraise around $680 for native plants, which will go, I want to say, to the left of the garden. If you remember the garden plan where the trees are, behind the tree and around that tree, there's some sunny area where we plan to build a native plants and pollinator section. So that's one way. And we also applied for the Xerces grant, which we were also approved for. And that's also a native plant grant that we'll receive in plants. And that will go in another section around the senior citizens building. It's more of a place where it's open lawn and they do stretching, sometimes gather there. And as part of our restoring the native ecosystem, there's also going to be a patch of native and pollinating plants on the other side, so around the garden. So let me see, I think that's that for native ecosystem. If I'm missing anything, please feel free to jump in. Ceci or Natasha or anyone who's here familiar with what we're doing. So that's one of our goals. Another goal is providing nutritious food to our community. So the garden is different from other community gardens, whereas in many community gardens, there are a few, as many garden beds as can fit, and then they each get allocated to one family or one individual. In our garden, because we only have 6 beds and 1 large kind of educational bed, we thought that we want to serve more than 6 people or even more than the 12 people if we were to divide it in half. We want to serve as many people as possible, especially Union City is considered a food desert. So it's really important to us that we have food accessible to the entire community and not just like a few families. So the way that our community garden is going to run is that we have an application process, and the plan is to select 25 people from the senior citizens building, as well as to other community members and other folks who have been involved from the beginning. And we're going to rotate kind of the maintenance and the schedule, and we're each going to, contribute in different ways. But mainly we're all growing food together, and that food will be distributed during harvest days, once or twice a week, where we'll prioritize the senior citizens, but we'll also welcome folks who, show up because they need food, especially those who have been volunteering their time. So our goal is to provide nutritious food to our community. And that's the plan for how we're going to achieve that. Another goal is intergenerational connection. So, as we've repeatedly been mentioning, the senior citizens are very excited to see us creating this garden. They come down every time they see us constructing and ask questions, and they want to be involved. And in the past, they have attempted to build their own community gardens or garden beds, but it really hasn't been successful for different reasons. And we really are, encouraging them to be a part of it. We did build the beds at least 3 feet high so that it will be accessible to them, so that they won't be bending over to like harvest or to take care of the plants. And another way that we're creating that intergenerational connection is that we're also going to start an urban youth farm club in collaboration with Hudson County 4-H. So we'll have youth from 12 to up to 16, I think it's up to 16, maybe 18 years old, where they will be coming in once a week to help maintain the garden, to collaborate with the elders and the volunteers, and to receive their own urban agricultural farming practices education, and to also help them create and establish that like bond to the land and that connection to the land that they are taking care of. So I believe that's some of what we have in store for now for intergenerational connection. And then we're also open to hear from you guys who are here in this workshop and spending time with us. Like, what are some of the ways that we could utilize this space in Union City to, what are some of the goals that you would like to see in our community? So you're welcome to share with us. And yeah, those are some of the garden goals. And as we keep growing and hearing from our community, I imagine that we'll have different goals also moving forward. Okay, so I'm looking at the chat, and yes, Ceci is reminding us that we're planning to plant a native pawpaw tree. So pawpaw trees are indigenous to Lenape land, which is the land that we are in right now. Prior to colonization, it was Lenape people who lived and stewarded the land. And one of the trees that are native to this region and that we don't see enough of right now is the pawpaw tree. And that's a fruit tree. The fruit is delicious. It's like a mix between a mango and a banana. Very yummy. And yeah, it's unlike anything you've ever tasted, but it's something that we hope to bring back and invite our communities to try. Let me see. So we have the pawpaw tree, the co-op community style. Yes, Natasha, it's very collectively organized and built. And while it's not a for-profit model, right? We're not like a cooperative in the way that we're creating funds together. We are the decision making is very cooperative based, and the investment is also very cooperative based, which means like everybody is equal ownership. Yeah. Any other questions or comments that you guys have about the crop plan or the garden goals, or how you could become a member?
Thank you, Roxana, so much for sharing all that beautiful yeah, garden goals is very appreciated. Claudia says, what an amazing garden vision. I absolutely agree.
And I'm just gonna throw it in here, some of our garden goals that I feel like we've already accomplishing with Natasha joining us is to be also working collaboratively with different organizations and different groups and institutions in order to see this grow even farther. So far we've been collaborating with like North American Earth Talks, which Ceci is the leader of. Are You Ready to Farm, which Natasha is representing today. Hudson County 4-H, whom I'm also affiliated with, and will be doing the Urban Youth Farm Club with, in collaboration with. So yeah, if there are other people who are like thinking of different ways to collaborate, then please, we welcome all ideas, and just shoot us a message or an email. And the Hudson County Community College, oh my God, the environmental club, always showing up during all of our garden builds. There's always someone to represent the Hudson County Community College Environmental Club. So shout out, Natasha is also affiliated with them, part of them. So yeah, we love you guys. So Sophia, to answer your question you asked, again, thank you. Sophia says, everything looks amazing. Curious about what would the process look like? Would people register and take care of their own plants? So as mentioned, we're not doing individual plat holders. Everybody's taking care of the plants communally. If you wanted to bring in your own plants, you're welcome to, but with the understanding that during harvest season, we'll probably be harvesting for everyone from those plants as well. But the process for registration, oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Right.
So we have a Q. Yeah, so we have an application you're welcome to apply to. We don't have a perfect application deadline yet, just because it's something that, we've been editing for a bit, but we definitely want to pick our core volunteers, hopefully by the end of the month. So our idea is to have a core group of at least 25 volunteers that can be on a rotating schedule. So everyone shares responsibility of the entire garden and has as a garden team, pick harvesting days so that we can share with each other and the community our yields. And if you scan the QR code, I can also put the link to it in the chat in the second. You'll see more about exactly how things will be run in terms of just how it will go. Actually, I can probably, if you guys don't mind being taken out of this for a second. So do you guys see this application here?
Yep.
Awesome. So this is just explains a little bit in English and Spanish, just a general guidelines. But this says May 20th. Please that's wrong because it's like only 4 days from now. So, but yeah, from the application, we'll choose 25 volunteers. Harvest days will be decided by the group, but with the understanding that it is part of the senior center, and the seniors will have full access to it at all times. So if they do end up taking the food before we can get to it, that is part of the understanding. But we will have rules posted along the lines of, sharing with the community and making sure that everyone is only taking what they need. We're really trying to make sure we feel invested in it as a community. That's the most important part for us. Do we have any other questions about the application process so far? We'll probably pick, the core team members so far in terms of like the people who have been a lot in the planning process will be the people who will be choosing the core volunteers that will be helping out the most. But even if you aren't, even if someone isn't picked, they are welcome to still attend events, still help out, still be part of the garden, join on harvest days. We're not trying to exclude anyone. We want everyone to be involved, but we also want to make sure we have a core group that we can rely on to consistently come and take care of the garden. So now that we have this from our sweet friend Natasha with the help of our team. So yes, we'll be planting this weekend and next, specifically Sunday the 21st. We'll be planting with Roxana's donations to us can you remind me, Roxana, what is the team that's been working on these seedlings?
Yeah, so Hudson County 4-H, along with the County of Hudson. County of Hudson has a greenhouse in Jersey City where we have been fortunate to start many seedlings, which we have enough to share with community. So we're bringing some of those plant babies to Union City.
Thank you so much for that. So we'll be starting with those, and then the rest will hopefully be planted the following weekend. We know that it's getting really warm out, and of course, time is of the essence. This entire project is volunteer run, but it's also funded by Union City Township, which is really great, and we're extremely grateful for having that resource. So we will be putting in our order this week to be able to purchase the plants for the following weekend. But if they come this weekend, then we'll plant them on Sunday as well. Yeah, we hope you can join us. Feel free to scan this QR code. It's a different QR code this time, but it's just the volunteer sheet that you can choose what days you're available to come. And this is super helpful for us to know how many people will be in attendance. Awesome. All right, Natasha, handing it back to you.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. Next slide, I think, has my info. If there are further questions, I encourage you all to reach out to the Union City Community Garden email address, and then Sasi and Roxana can funnel those and filter those questions out to me, and hopefully I can get some answers your way. But I do want to say thank you so much for having me, and I hope that this was beneficial for those on the call. I know this was kind of like a fast track synopsis of what crop planning is, but hopefully we were able to target some of the most common challenges and concerns when you're putting together a plan for your garden. So thank you again to Rutgers 4-H and for Union City Community Gardens and all the amazing active directors on this garden for having me tonight.
Thank you, Natasha. That was amazing. It seems so seamless and easy, but we know like the hours of research and like work and thought you have put into this. So we just want to like give a huge thank you to you for volunteering your time and your knowledge, your expertise with us.
Of course, thank you. Happy to share.
Yes, round of applause. Thank you guys for joining tonight. Please, if you have any other questions, feel free to use the email or Instagram, any other capacity. Does anyone have any last minute questions? Anything else they want to say before we head off here? All right, well, thank you guys all so much. We hope you have an amazing rest of your evening and get some good rest. Eat a lovely meal. Tell your parents and your friends and your family you love them. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you all.